And once again, this is Doug Ruffin here for the Buffalo History Channel. We're on location today in the city of Buffalo at the University at Buffalo for a very, very key interview, one that I've been looking forward to for a very long time. I'd like to welcome this brother to the channel. He's not only my dear fraternity brother in Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, but he is a very well-accomplished professor and historian who has documented and chronicled Buffalo's history for many, many years. He also has some B.U.I.L.D organization roots, which I'm definitely looking forward to talking about. We're going to talk about he'll talk to us about the development of Buffalo, the history of Jefferson Avenue, even some of the work with the current work that they're doing with the 33 and lots. We're going over a lot of Buffalo's history as well as his history, and it is my pleasure to welcome the one and only Dr. Henry Taylor to the Buffalo History Channel. Dr. Taylor, welcome, my brother.
It's a pleasure to chat with you, my brother.
Okay, well, certainly welcome to the Buffalo History Channel. Now, I know that your roots are not in Buffalo, but you came to Buffalo. Could you talk to us about where you came from and what brought you to Buffalo?
Yeah, I'm originally from Nashville, Tennessee, and after graduating from the University of Tennessee with a master's degree in clinical audiology, I went to Newport News, Virginia, to open a clinic. I've been fortunate to be raised by a dad who was an academic. In fact, he got his Ph.D. from Cornell back in 1954. And I was raised, and he always asked the same question over and over and over again. Son, what victories will you win for humanity?
Right.
And he taught me that the knowledge that you have can either be used selfishly or for the people. And he believed that the greater the talent, the greater the responsibility to serve the people. And so I became a clinical audiologist in order to do that. While at Newport News and Hampton Institute, I came to understand that the problems that were confronted with blacks were much more complex than I had thought, and that we were facing powerful forces that consistently and continuously kept us in an oppressed and an exploited condition. And by exploited, I mean we were paid much less than our labor was worth. And we were forced to live in neighborhoods and communities where we paid an exorbitant amount for every commodity that we had to get, including housing. Paid much, much more than housing than it was actually worth. And the homes that we owned were undervalued. And so that's what I mean. We were exploited both at the places where we worked, and we were exploited at the places where we lived. And those levels of exploitation and the pressure and the stress that we lived under produced all kinds of health problems and other issues that we were confronted with. And as I gained insight into that, I joined a radical group modeled after the Black Panther Party. But as I talked with my colleagues, there was so little that I understood. You know, they thought because I had a college degree and a master's degree, I had all kinds of knowledge, man. And I knew everything you wanted to know about the cochlear microphonics of the Sudanese rat, but not much about the conditionality facing black people. So I decided to go back to school. And a guy that had recruited me, by then I was at Hampton Institute, an all-black school, had recruited me there, had gotten a job at University of Buffalo, and said, come to Buffalo and we can get you in the history department where you can study these issues and questions. Came to Buffalo, did all of my coursework here. But while working, I joined a radical group called the Black Workers Congress, a national organization led by Jim Foreman. But we operated secretly here in Buffalo. But a lot of our members are kind of like a who's who in Buffalo's history. People like Jim Pitts, Rob Gitney, Shakur Al-Jawani, Stephanie Phillips, Clyde Giles, and that just go on. And we worked in a lot of organizations and groups, attempting to push them farther to the left, attempting to get them to see deeper the challenges that black people were facing. Then the organization asked me to leave, drop out of school, and go to Cincinnati to organize workers. And, back then you operated as if you were in the military. So I went on to Cincinnati and left school and organized workers. And after the organization was destroyed by the government's counterintelligence program, I thought that we needed to build research institutes that could link advanced production of knowledge to the struggles that were going on down on the ground in the community. That we needed to build a bridge between the production of knowledge for social change and to get that insights into the hands of the people in ways that they could use it. So I developed the concept for that center, went to Ohio State, perfected it, and eventually, after a series of negotiation, University of Buffalo brought me here. In fact, I was rejected the position initially, and Bill Griner, who was then provost and later became president, called me and said, "Look, son, we are rejecting your rejection. Put together a package that will bring you here." And that's how I ended up in Buffalo. And once I came here, I came to realize that it would be wrong for me to leave. That I was not going to operate like many people, come to a place, make a big name, and then move on and make more money and make more money. So for me, as I became involved in a lot of the things that were going on in the community, I made the decision that I would be a person who stayed in the city and devoted the remainder of my life to the fight and the battle to improve our conditions and to lay the foundation for our ultimate freedom at some point in the future.
Okay, you mentioned the name that, and I remember when I did that, rang a bell. I did years ago. I did a documentary on the history of the B.U.I.L.D, and one of the stories involved the name of Clyde Giles, and there was of course, there was this infamous convention where he was trying to run for B.U.I.L.D president against Ed Pearson, and I guess it kind of culminated a little bit of a altercation at the B.U.I.L.D convention at New Skateland in May 13th, 1972.
I was there.
You were there.
I was there.
Okay. Okay. What's, because I never had the other part of that story. So it's always interesting and intriguing to get people's accounts of that story. So what's your account of what happened that night at the convention?
Well, it's not so much what happened the night of the convention as prior to the convention.
Okay.
We have felt that, when I say we, I'm talking about the Black Workers Congress and our collective here in the city of Buffalo, including some of and many more people that I named, because we were quite large.
Right.
Felt that the B.U.I.L.D organization had been captured by middle-class ideology.
Okay.
And that as long as it was anchored to that ideology, that it would not really push hard to battle on the fronts that we needed to battle to acquire ultimate liberation of folks here in the city of Buffalo. We thought it needed a much more aggressive, it needed a much more radical program.
I got you.
And most importantly, we needed to guard against middle-class co-optation and the dangers of a kind of capture of that organization that would continually push it down a road of conciliation and a refusal to fight for harder issues, especially with so much of its money flowing from the federal government. And so, as part of our styles of work, we had cadre in these organizations, and Giles and I think Kidney was a part of that particular grouping. And we decided to battle out and fight for the leadership of the organization.
Right.
And Giles ran for president, which of the board, which would have been a critical kind of position. And we had a radical slate that we put forward in that. And as you know, back in that moment, it was a moment where there was a great deal of democracy working inside of the community. Mm-hmm. And there was massive votings and the like. Yeah. And the convention was when all of these things came together. And the convention, as anticipated, because everyone knew what was at stake, there was an enormous amount of tension. And the place was packed, man. And then I'm not sure how it all started, but a fight broke out. Mm-hmm. And there was battling going on. And I remember looking up, I never will forget it. Jim Rowe was on stage.
That's the person that jumped off the stage?
Yes. Oh, you heard about that?
Oh, yes, I heard. That's the biggest thing I heard about.
No, that was Jim Rowe. I looked at Jim, and Jim was like, he was Superman. Fire duty. It's Jim Rowe, man. Jim Rowe. And, you know, I don't know anybody who remembers Jim, but, you know, he's a former vet, fearless.
Yeah.
He's a warrior. And, you know, he went through some awful times.
Wow.
And rebounded and returned to who he originally was. But that was Jim Rowe diving off the stage, man.
I've heard that story for years, man.
Because of the events of last evening and the disruption of the annual convention and the inability of the organization to conduct its business and elect officers, as the president of the organization, since there is no new elections, I am immediately suspending all staff of this organization and putting the operation of the organization in the hands of the elected officers who were elected at last year's convention until such time that we are able to establish procedures for an impartial election. The process in terms of trying to reach these procedures will begin immediately.
Clyde Giles is the man who is running for election.
For several years, the B.U.I.L.D. organization has been controlled by a select group of individuals under the leadership of William Gator, executive director of the staff, who has used the power and the prestige of this organization for his and the staff's own personal aggrandizement at the expense of the black community. This year, I, Clyde Giles, a candidate for the president of B.U.I.L.D., with a slate of people's candidates, sought to challenge this group and bring B.U.I.L.D. back to the people.
The siege of B.U.I.L.D.'s convention and the reckless charges Mr. Giles is making about B.U.I.L.D. leaders is calculated to destroy the B.U.I.L.D. organization. For those of us who have worked and fought with the B.U.I.L.D. organization over the past 5 years, this move by Mr. Giles' forces must be closely examined. We must ask ourselves, A, who is Mr. Giles? What is his background and record? After all, Mr. Giles is relatively a newcomer to Buffalo. Where did he come from and what did he do there? B, what does Mr. Giles mean when he says, bring B.U.I.L.D. back to the people? For the past 5 years, we all know that B.U.I.L.D. has held open meetings and conventions, fought every issue relevant to the needs of the minority people, and never rejected the participation of the serious-minded citizens in this community.
Gentlemen, if you could, what is the major difference between the Pearson platform and the Giles platform?
One of the differences is that we are structured to be a community-minded, community-based, community action organization. What Mr. Giles proposes to do is to entertain national and international planes. We were not structured for that. This is a community organization, and we feel that our efforts should be exerted in this community. We have enough community problems to solve before we go on a national or international plane.
And we obviously lost that election. And in a lot of ways, that was a turn point in B.U.I.L.D. And as we had anticipated and had tried to stop, it would only be a matter of time before that organization got co-opted. And eventually things kind of fell apart.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. 1972, man.
Yeah.
And I was there. But that's the back story. It's a story that's only in oral history because, you know, we were careful with the records that we kept. Right. And there are only a few historical remnants that even hint at this association. Right. And Jolie Hall just wrote a brilliant dissertation that chronicles much of B.U.I.L.'s history. Okay. And she was puzzled about all of that, and I was on her committee, and I said, well, let me tell you what happened. Yeah. But that was the backdrop. Yeah, I remember when that story, man. When I first heard about, I went to my father. So because we had a film of that I was researching and looking through the newsreels, and I remember seeing this newsreel of Reverend Richard Ford at the time talking about, because of the events of last evening, I'm suspending all staff of the organization. And I went back to my dad. Okay, what did y'all do? It was a bitter struggle. Yeah, between the left forces in the B.U.I.L.D. organization and the moderate and more conservative groups. And the moderate and the more conservative groups won in that fight and that battle. Yeah. But the organization never quite fully recovered from that. And I don't think it ever would have, because based upon our assessments, the organizations that thought they could resolve these issues by being even better capitalists than the capitalists, those programs were never going to ultimately succeed. We didn't have we didn't have many of the answers to the challenges that they faced for some of the reasons that I was telling you. But we understood the direction that you had to go in order to find answers to those challenges. And we knew that the road that they were traveling on was not a road that would carry them to any form and any type of solution. And history had absolved us, because history has clearly demonstrated that they were on the road to nowhere. And it took them a while to get there. Yeah. But in the end, like others who followed that road, they ended up nowhere. Yeah. And today it's almost as if they never existed. Yeah. So when you came to Buffalo and you chronicled a lot of much of Buffalo's history. When you came here, what did you see? How did you see the community when you got here and began your work? Well, Buffalo was unlike any other place I'd ever been to. I mean, one of the most amazing things to me, everything looked the same. It took me a minute, when all of these double houses, took a minute to get used to that. And so that was very, very, very different from me. Also, what was very, very different from me was the rich ethnicity that existed with all of the different types of white people, and most significantly, all of the different types of Black people. And, I come from a simple world. There were Black people and white people. Black people didn't know where they came from in Africa, and these stupid redneck white folks didn't know where they came from in Europe. And so even though tensions existed between those groups, it was different. And then I grew up in a Nashville that was a middle-class city. And I never understood that black people couldn't do whatever they wanted to, because in Nashville there was lawyers and doctors and dentists and pharmacists. There were airplane pilots. Anything you saw or thought about, it was there. There were rich black people, poor black people. And so, I never even, the grocery store was owned by black people. You went to the bank, that was owned by black people. You went to the hospital, all your doctors were black, because that's where Meharry was, and the nurses were black. So you grew up with a different sense of who and what you were. When I came here and I saw the levels of hardship, which I'd seen before in places elsewhere, but I saw beauty in the people, man. I saw strength. I saw a sophistication because of the blending of the people from New York, the blending of the people from Canada, the hardcore working class nature of the city, and I kind of fell in love with what I saw, and the kind of toughness of the people. I didn't understand these inter-black fights because I didn't know about West Indians, and when people would say, "Oh, those West Indians, they think this," I said, "What are you talking about?" Because we didn't think about those things down south, and so the power of all of that was I could walk in a community where there were all kinds of divisions, but I wasn't a part of any of those divisions, and had never been a part of any of those kinds of divisions. And so it was easy for me to kind of see and understand things. And I just wanted to get involved and connected. And that's why I reached out and found out who was with the community, and found who was in the Black Workers Congress here, because I knew it existed here before I came, and made contacts with folks, and immediately got involved with things that were going on down on the ground in the neighborhoods.
Yeah, one of the cornerstones of the Black community of Buffalo is Jefferson Avenue. You've chronicled the way you've chronicled Buffalo's history. Could you give us your perspective of what Jefferson Avenue's history was from its very beginning to where it is today?
Yeah, I mean, what a lot of us don't understand is that Buffalo is what we call a second order Black community. It's a Black community that didn't emerge as we know it until after World War II, from 1950 on. As late as 1940, there were only about 17,000 Black people living here. And people talk about a Black community, but that Black community was integrated or shared residential space with the white immigrant community. Most notably, the Russian Jewish communities where they live closest to, the Italians, Polish, the Irish. They all shared space down there in and around William Street. And they even lived, in a number of instances, Doug, in the same boarding houses on Jefferson Avenue. And so it wasn't until the post-war era that Blacks became physically segregated from whites. That's not in the Buffalo DNA, man. I hate to bust anybody's bubble, but for the great majority of Black history, they shared residential space. They have shared residential space with white people much longer than they have been separate from white people in the city of Buffalo. So when large numbers of Blacks start to pour into the city, and by large number between around 1950 and 70, in that 20-year period, we're talking about close to 100,000 Black people moving in. So when I came to the city around 1970, although I didn't understand it at that time. I was right at the tail end of that transformation period and the growth and the development of Black Buffalo. So in this moment in time, the center of the Black population shifted from down there in and around William Street, where we built our institutions in proximity to others, up into the Maston area, where Jefferson Avenue, particularly between Best and Ferry, became the heartland of the African American community. And that's at this moment in time when folks talk back about that brief glory day, when you have all of the wonderful stories about what was happening and what was going on Jefferson Avenue. And it was, in fact, the heart of the Black community at that moment. I mean, when I just got in the city and we wanted to go out to party, you just headed down on Jefferson Avenue. That's where all of the clubs and other types of things. And I didn't even live on the east side at that time. I lived up on the west side. But that's where we would go party into the night, man. And Scotty's Steakhouse was right there, man. And you see a big line of everybody trying to eat before they go home after the night of party.
And a lot of night spots, Pinewood.
All that stuff was concentrated right in that area because that was where the population was centered. But even at that early period, we could see the danger signs setting in, because that was right at the tail end of the Model Cities program. And from the plans and other types of things that were going on, the plans that they were developing for the medical campus, the kind of expansion plans that they had, the movement of the football stadium away. You knew, and you could see from a study of the changes that were occurring in the economy, that these pieces were altering. And you could begin to see how the northern part of the east side was beginning to shift because the population was moving. There was no stabilities at all. And I could see the beginnings of these things as a student. I was still a student then and still trying to figure things out and still trying to understand how we got to be where we were. And it would only be later when I first got here and we did this book on Black Buffalo, which was the most comprehensive study ever done on the African American community, that now I could understand for the first time what was happening and what was going on. And this book was more than just a book. We put together a unique team of scholars to do that. But most significantly, Doug, based on everything that we knew and understood at that moment back in 1990, we outlined a strategic plan and a vision of the type of city and neighborhood and community that we thought should be built. And the critical mistake that was made was, I thought that all you had to do was give this to people, and they would follow it. But what I found was the Urban League at that moment in time got so hung up over the fact that, I don't want to say hung up, but they didn't quite understand that to go forward, you actually had to study and understand what was in here. And then you had to study the strategy that we put forward there. And on the basis of that, develop the projects, the programs, and activities to move forward with. So, but they just took it. I don't think anybody on the Urban League ever read it. And nobody ever studied it. So and people continue to do what they did without understanding the concepts and the frameworks that we put together in the report. So the report represented an important reference point. One, it was written in the same spirit of the Philadelphia Negro. We didn't want to just take a moment in time, but we took a look at the movement of Black Buffalo from 1940 to 1980, that 40-year period. And that was when the community grew from a small enclave. And we wanted to understand the forces that were driving the development of the population so that we could see that Blacks were being increasingly separated from work. We could see that. They were moving, we could see the movement away from industrial jobs. We did a special analysis with a guy named Art Butler, an economist, to show how the jobs were being separated out, to see the rise of service sector jobs and the disappearance. So we knew that they were being dislocated, and we knew that the dislocation meant that the number of people that were participating in the labor force were falling off. That is, that there was a growing number of Blacks who were no longer searching for jobs. We could see that. And we could see that those that were getting jobs were being paid proportionately less than whites. And we could see that the unemployment was growing, and these were people who were looking for work but couldn't find it. So we could see all those trend lines emerging at that moment in time. And we knew that if the trend lines continued to evolve the way they would, that on the educational front, on the employment front, and on the housing front, the conditions would worsen over time. And based on that, we formulated a strategy to combat it. And we did more than just a strategy. We articulated a vision of what the community would look like if we reach all of our goals and objectives. And no one picked it up. No one.
Wow.
No one. The Urban League did nothing. They did absolutely nothing. And some of them got so caught up in, and it was not my doing, I had nothing to do with it, that the press called this the Taylor Report, not the Urban League Report. And some people just couldn't get over that. But for whatever the reasons, they didn't pick it up, and none of the other groups in the city picked it up. And so the lesson that we learned from that, and the lesson that that we carry forward into the future, and that the future is now, is that when we work in partnership with other people around strategies to change the community, then we join those people as a team member in fighting to then implement the strategy. And so the lessons that we learned from the production of this book have allowed us to function very different later. And it was also this book when Pastor George Nicholas says to me 4 or 5 years ago, we need to know whether we're making progress. We need to know whether or not we're moving in the right direction. This book was the reference point.
Yeah.
It showed not only where we were in 1990, but it clearly indicated where we wanted to go. And it was absolutely clear, man, that in the time span between the moment that this book was written and today, nothing, no progress had been made. And we measured progress not in terms of the liberals' fake progress. Well, how large is your middle class? How many Negro firsts did you have? How many Black people can we now see on TV? That's not progress. Progress is what happens to the majority of people. And I say that today is 2025. Over 400 years since slavery was ended. We've had a Black president. We got Oprah. We got all of these millionaire basketball players. We got all of these high-profile people parading in Hollywood, etc. We're in a moment in time when most white people, because of our prevalence in the press, think that Black people comprise around 40 to 50% of the population. And we're only 12%. But yet, Doug, when we look at the hard stats, and I just looked at them yesterday, we're still at the bottom of the economic order, below the indigenous population. Black people cannot look down at any other group in this country. Our median household income is the lowest. Our unemployment rate is the highest. Our home ownership rate is next to the lowest. And our poverty rate is the highest. Over 400 years after slavery. And the reason is that we have not waged the right kinds of struggle. And Buffalo mirrored those stats. And that's what we're trying to do in our latest project, moving in a completely different direction. When we look at the Black positionality in the United States, right, and we look at the conditions facing many other people, because there were lots of hard hitting white people.
Right. And
the trick of the Trump administration is to tell these white people that they're suffering because of Black people and immigrants, rather than the other issues. So we understand that the exploitation and oppression of Blacks at the workplace and in the living place are driven by racial capitalism, and how racial capitalism creates a world in urban centers where, for example, housing in neighborhoods are hierarchical. And they're hierarchical so that they can begin to be centers of wealth production. When we say the home as an instrument of wealth production, profit making. We have to then ask, well, if it's an instrument of profit making and wealth accumulation, how does it derive its value? Through exclusion. Exclusion. Exclusivity is what gives it value. And so the communities are organized on the basis of layers of exclusivity, from the most exclusive, which is the highest value, to the least exclusive, which is the lowest value. Exclusivity is determined by race and class and income. And that's a reflection of the white supremacy hierarchical model. And that's how wealth is distributed in this country. So we're locked in dilapidated and rundown environments because of that. Yet we try to emulate that environment. Our biggest challenge is that we embrace white supremacy. Black people, immigrant people, we embrace white supremacy. And by that I mean to say, we embrace the world that allow whites to occupy that supreme position. And we argue only for inclusion in that. Even though Baldwin said, why do you want to be included in a burning house? What he was saying is that something is wrong with that model. But we embrace it anyway. And wonder why it doesn't work. And then the people who get there, the handful says, be like me. And they're saying, be like white people. If you model everything that they say, and you look at white society, you see that's the reference point. Well, how can you model what puts you where you are? So our step was to step back and say, what if we imagine a very different but possible Buffalo? What if we imagine a very different but possible East Side? You can search the documents over and over, all throughout B.U.I.L.D. and all the activities. It's not a single solitary vision of the type of community they wanted to build. So we have that. You have a picture of what it should look like. Just to show folks that imagery. And then looking, how do we take what we already have and create something different with it? So our goal is to create an East Side that is healthy, that is prosperous, that is joyful. Because joy has to be an integral part of life, bro. Mm-hmm. And a part of that is beginning to understand what is going on in your community. Looking at oppression head to head, not pretending it's something else. So you listen to people, well, if we could just get the black family together.
Yeah, we hear a lot about that.
Yeah, that's not your problem. The black family didn't create this. Mm-hmm. Well, if black men would just stay home. No. No. You have to look at what created this. It's like incarceration. Black men are in jail. Of course they are. But then you ask the question, well, why is it that mass incarceration only occurs at a particular moment? I can give you the date, 1970. It has a date. It has a place and a person. It starts with the draconian Rockefeller drug laws. Yeah. Then you look deeper and you find out that the sources of the drugs are the government. They poured that stuff into the community. Then they did not put together effective treatment programs. This woman, Nahanda Soke Abiodun, Matula Shakur, they developed a system of acupuncture to detox. And what happened? They were crushed.
Wow.
They were crushed. And the government used the crime generated by the epidemic that they had started to justify mass incarceration. And today we put more of our people in prison than any other nation on the planet Earth. Than any other nation on the planet Earth. And you're going to tell me if black men, stop! Just stop. And let's build something else. Because at the same time that they're denouncing these black men, starting with the one-hand report, talking about how irresponsible they are, that's the story, right? Mm-hmm. But who led the Black Panther Party? Who led the Civil Rights Movement? Wow. Who were the engines that drove the rise of the Nation of Islam?
Black men.
You see what I'm talking about?
Exactly.
Who were the forces that were battling for the fight against sexism? I was also led by black men as women rose and said, oh no, bro, we're fighting side by side with you. You get your own damn coffee. So if we understand who we are, then we can then begin to work with others across the racial and class divide to build a new place, a new vision. And that's what we're talking about now. Okay. And that's what we're moving forward with now. Okay. We're saying we're not trying to reproduce whiteness over here. We're producing something that is not built around a hierarchical, suppressive manner. We're not trying to emulate white supremacy. We reject the notion, be like white. Mike is a metaphor for white.
Yeah.
You know, and we reject that. We reject the idea that the black middle class is a role model. For what? For collaborating? For trying to be white? For pretending it's all right? No. Because when we look to see who were on the front lines and who were battling and fighting, the more we move away from those models and those values and create new models and values based on humanity, That's where change comes from, man.
So as
We have to free our mind of these existing concepts, assumptions, and theories. And if those things worked, then why is our situation so unchanged? And that's what we're talking about.
okay. So as I get ready to bring this interview to a close, and I know we want to talk about the future of Buffalo going forward. I just saw that you're on the part of the mayor's transition team. What is your vision for Buffalo's future going forward?
I'm very optimistic. We worked hard to try to create a new government that sees the world in a much more progressive way than the previous administrations, one headed by a black man, frat brother, Byron Brown, who consistently did the wrong thing. And I can talk about Byron because I worked closely with Byron. And I fought with Byron. And I finally broke with Byron when I realized he did not have the interests of black people at heart. And the government that he had created was not going to be a government that supported and fought for change. And I broke ranks with him. But for a long time, I worked closely with him. I was a part of a secret group he put together of black folks. It lasted for a short time, but that was going to be his black cabinet. And he put Nate Hare and myself in charge of developing policies and programs and activities. And as soon as he got reelected, he disbanded the group. He got what he wanted. But we finally got somebody that I think in office that really sees the future in ways that are compatible. And so I think we have an opportunity to build a coalition of groups from across the city and begin to articulate new strategies. And I think the work down on the ground is more important than ever in terms of people really coming together to put together progressive projects and programs, because the next few years are going to be extremely difficult. We've got a city hall that's broke financially, and we've got a number of offices in City Hall that have not functioned anywhere near their capacity for a very, very long time. Along with civil service workers, I think, who have been so beaten that they see work as just some place to go to draw a check rather than having the opportunity to build something. So we've got a lot of cultural changes and shifts to occur. And we've got a lot of resetting to do that's going to take time. But I think I'm super optimistic about the future. And I think we're on the right road. And when you're on the right road and there's a lot of challenges and difficulties ahead, you smile because it's the road not taken. And that's why those things exist. And you look over at the superhighway, that's the road to nowhere. So we're going down a different path, and but it's our best hope and our best possibility. So I'm more excited today than I've ever been before. And we've got some people with the groups that I work with that we've never put a coalition like that together before. And so I'm excited about all of that leadership down on the ground. Excited about working with a lot of old heads who have been through a lot of wars and battles that can pass on that knowledge and insights to our next generation that will take our place. Yeah. So life is good. The struggle and the battle for freedom is alive. And I think that we are out front in the nation, both Buffalo and now New York State. So it's a good time to be a Buffalonian, and it's a good time to be a New Yorker. But make no mistake, we're in a storm right now. And we have to weather that storm and then defeat the storm makers because they're not going to go away, and they will continue to fight. But I'm confident, optimistic, and I'm ready, brother.
All right, my man.
I'm ready.
All right. Dr. Taylor, it has been a pleasure to have had you on the Buffalo History Channel.
And thank you.
Absolutely.